All right, everybody. Well, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. Sorry for the little delay, but had to leave room for Hansel and Gretel to leave the little path over to get here. So thanks everyone for joining today. We're going to go ahead and do our introductions in just a second. My name is Todd Cattler, and we'll be introducing the other presenters in just a moment. But what we wanted to talk about today is one of the cool things about AIM and even some other conferences is you get to come here and you get to check out really, really cool stuff people are building, or really, really cool new ways people are thinking about how to operate their businesses. And whether it's tech or a different strategy or some combination of the two, it's really fun. Show of hands, like how many people have been coming here? How many people have been here 5 times? How about 10 times? How about every year? Just me? Okay, been here since it started. Anyways, like this conference is great for fostering new ideas and new creativity within our industry, which our industry always needs. We house a third of the people that live, well, probably more than that now, in the country. So we need to always be pushing the envelope. The thing, though, that I think sometimes, I knew I was missing something. The thing that sometimes gets missed, in our opinion, is some of the simple stuff. And it's so often that we're focused on a bright, new, shiny object that we don't stop and take a look at about what's some basic blocking and tackling. What are some low-hanging fruit that are sitting right in front of us? And we decided, the 3 of us, to focus on these 3 things: poop, parking, and packages. And a lot of this is anchored in around the voice of the resident, which, while we all have our jobs to do, it's sort of the ultimate scoreboard is how the residents are viewing you, how they're accepting or unaccepting of your practices. And sometimes it's inherited stuff that was because the way the property was built or not built, and you're just stuck with it. But it's, it's your circus and those are your monkeys. So let's go ahead, and I will let my, I guess I'll start since I'm already talking. I'm Todd Cattler. I'm the CEO of Ozark Parking. I've been, probably half the room probably knows me. I've been in the industry about 28 years with a variety of different prop tech companies. And David, I will turn it over to you.
Everybody, thank you for coming. My name is David Maid. I'm the principal and founder of, can everybody hear me? Is that better? Of Oculus Realty, based outside of Washington, D.C. We are owner, managers, developers, and advisors in multifamily and retail management.
Nick?
Thanks, David. My name is Nick Dunlap, and I'm the founder and president of Spadra Property Company. We do third-party property management, and we're also an owner-operator as well, headquartered here in Orange County. I'm actually grateful to be here with 2 of my favorite industry people as well. So it's not every day you get to see these folks, especially David coming from D.C., and Todd's up in LA, might as well be from another country sometimes, right? Because he flew in from another country to be here. So, but very, very excited to be here with all of you as well.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so some of the things that we talk about when we're talking about resident demand is it an impossible problem to solve for? Can you actually make a dent on it? And so I think if you want to talk a little bit about
Yeah, so
Grace overviews.
So the concept that we're trying to do here today is talk about resident amenities and services. So it's not just the physical amenities that your properties have, but it's also the amenity services that you provide. And how do you keep it simple to be able to provide the most value for your stakeholders on your residents, that are your residents primarily, but also your staff and everybody else. And so when looking at these kind of issues, are you here because you're interested in solving a problem that you have now, or are you looking at something more holistic on your properties? So, for example, on package delivery, is that something from a show of hands that you guys are struggling with right now as a resident amenity? Who deals with their packages that are issues? All right, that's less people than we thought would have that as an issue. What about dog waste? That's the poop in our poop packages and parking. All right, good.
How many of you are not going to raise your hand no matter what we ask? Okay, thank you for being honest.
Thank
sir.
you.
Yeah, okay. Nick, did you want to?
You want to dive in? No? Okay, we're good.
So, yeah, so we were talking about this. There's a difference between, oh, I want to solve for X, and I believe this will have a positive influence on one of these things. But in talking to our friends and talking amongst ourselves, how many people came here and said, okay, well, okay, here's a weird one because you wouldn't do this, but like, how many people came here because I got to solve for covered parking, right? I guarantee the answer is 0. Like you showed up to AIM because like you're trying to solve for covered parking, but it's like third highest on the list, right? So that's one of those things, perhaps a bad example because you can't really do anything about that here. But nevertheless, these are the types of things that often go unnoticed or undervalued because it's sort of like, oh, I'm going to Miami in August. I want to deal with I need a solution to deal with the humidity. Well, you can't. It's going to be humid, right? That's just Miami. That's Miami in August. So it's one of those things of like, but what can you do to mitigate something where there is some influence or control that you can exert?
Covered parking will help.
Covered parking would help.
In Miami.
Barely. Okay, so here's the way we wanted to approach this. One is like, let's take a look at the data, right? Maybe the problem isn't as bad as you think. Maybe it's worse. Make it less bad. Right? So you're not going to solve some of these issues. Like when I was on the property side, we bought this property not that far from here. It was like our biggest acquisition ever at the time, 500 units in Marina Del Rey. And you were never going to not get those halls not having poop everywhere. It was the resident profile. It was kind of a mess. And that's what it was going to be. But can you make it less bad? Sometimes that's the win. Last but not least, how do we see the results, evaluate it, assess it? How was your plan? What can we do differently? So let's start with looking at the data. So this is one I'm going to take just because it's sort of near and dear to my heart. This was one of the most fascinating things I learned last year, is that about 1%, and the highest it gets is about 2%, of all of your residents cause almost all of your parking issues. And so if you said, hey, this community's underparked, I didn't build it, the city wouldn't let us do more, I can't add more parking spots, that is what it is. That's probably true. But you can solve for the 1 or 2% of your knucklehead residents who simply are so inconsiderate that they don't care. And that's something that you can take action on, you can track, it's measurable, and say, hey, we're gonna take these people that simply have no regard for everyone else who lives here and find a way to make them more accountable. Maybe they don't need to live here anymore. That's a non-renewal. Maybe that's the most extreme example, but there is a path forward that you can solve for.
So the next item is big problems can actually be small. This is some stats that we have at one of our properties in Frederick, Maryland on our EV charging, which has been very extensive and been a great amenity for us. But we have a few residents, 2 primarily, who take advantage and overstay and make this a negative for a lot of the other residents that are in the building, particularly when those who own EVs have started to grow particularly. So it's a relatively small issue, but through technology, we're able to solve it, basically. And of course, what we're doing is we charge extra. If after a 4-hour period, which is what it should take to charge a car, suddenly the fee for charging your car for staying there triples. And so it's one of those little things that was just a tweak that needed to get done to be able to understand that the bad apples are going to get out of the barrel. And that will solve so many of your problems. You have this wonderful amenity, but you don't want it in your reviews of every time I try to use it, there's somebody there. So keeping in track about the problem that you're having with lack of revenue or bad reputation, whatever it is, may be something relatively small. It's management by walking around, making sure you see what's happening, and collecting the data.
What kind of drop-off did you see when you did that?
0.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, wow.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. How many people are struggling with the EV thing right now?
I will say, so
You're all lying.
100%. I just wanted him to say it, but I don't want to be the guy that said it again. So,
well, I think the interesting thing is we were kind of so we were early adapters across like kind of B and C garden style product here in Orange and LA counties, and I think through that, we were maybe a little bit ahead of the curve, and so we kind of provided, right, the amenity before it was really there outside of like maybe investor or client or other like corporate need. But I think it's really important, especially in California with a lot of the trends that we're seeing. We were able to get there a lot, and in some cases it was heavily subsidized, right, because of some of these utility companies. I think our problem is that we're a little ahead of the curve from our tenant profile perspective, and I think that's probably the case with a lot of properties across California.
Yeah, I was talking, actually, Keith, who's standing back there, was actually the one talking with him, with a really big, prominent developer here in Southern California, who was saying that their new developments, they're required 40% EV parking, which seemed like a spicy meatball. Has anyone ever heard a number that high? Like, I'd never heard anything over 20, and I was like, 40? Like, I was like,
City?
Irvine.
Irvine? Wow.
Might have their name in the company. But it was like that's really a giant number. I was like, damn. Like, and then what does it do to the rest of your parking, right? So it's kind of a mess. Anyways, something for another topic. Okay.
So the next item is kind of getting down to the nitty-gritty, and that's what I referred to in the last slide, is making sure that you really do understand what the issue is by collecting the data, paying attention, and understanding. It's not just building the amenity. I'm going to put a package locker in, or I'm going to put EV, or I'm going to put covered parking, or whatever it is that your resident profile is looking for. It's making sure that things continue to run well, and that's where you constantly have to measure. And we're going to talk about how that plays into reputation and saves money and drives NOI with your amenities. You can't just build it and forget it. You need to manage it. And here's an example. This is one of our properties in the District of Columbia, where, in fact, we don't really have a lot of problems, but it's the kind of thing where 1% is just because of the system itself is broken down. And so that's such a small issue that's easily taken care of. It's all the other issues that you need to make sure that you're paying attention to. So having the right provider, having the right infrastructure, or maybe deciding that how you're managing package is completely wrong. We've actually moved away from package lockers to package rooms, because we found that the problem with the package lockers was that the delivery guys weren't actually using them. And even though that was a really cool thing, but it took us measuring and getting the feedback to really understand that a package was missing, or that it was delivered damaged, or any of the other things that are up here, by constantly monitoring what was going on. Add to that?
Yeah, I would just add, so we did the math, and you talk about managing what you measure, or measuring what you manage. We did the math, and it was between 250 to 288 units at just a conventional or workforce community, that we found that the amount of packages going through the office warranted some sort of package locker or an additional package management system, but it wasn't enough just to get the system in place in order for it to help staff, in order for it to alleviate the staff pull. It was to also kind of continue to manage these, the concerns surrounding the package system, to make sure that you are responding to the concerns, and that they aren't still continuing to spend their time, managing, a package that got put in the wrong locker, or something that was actually left at the front gate and not at the locker, and that sort of thing. So there's any number of issues that still arise, but you've got to really push your people to stay on top of those things and make sure that they're using it to their full benefit.
So real quick, when you guys think about reviews, so I'm going to tell you what the two options are before you vote, because otherwise it might not be fair. So the two options would be, I look at reviews from the viewpoint of like, how do we reduce turnover, right, or increase resident satisfaction? And the second bucket would be, or which one do you like better? And the second one would be, I look at reviews as a way to prevent an obstacle from acquiring new residents. So how many people no, it's more just improving resident quality? Like, that's what I think the biggest benefit of reviews are.
By show of hands.
Show of hands. And how many people think it helps me on the acquisition side, right? So I'm not getting beating up publicly. How many are saying, I actually have a third one, Todd, you didn't say it, so I'm not answering. Anyone want to share? Okay, both. And I think as you focus on the first one, you actually do help the second one, so I know they're not mutually exclusive. But it's kind of interesting to see how that's turned. I think, this is not new, but as reviews become more part and parcel with how we shop, you can't just ignore it. I remember, years ago, I did a study on how many people move across the street because they don't like the manager or they don't like the property. And the answer was tiny. It was sub 3% of all of our turnover, was people who are saying, yeah, I'm going across the street. These guys are jerks, or they never fix things, or whatever. And it was the vast majority like, oh no, I need a bigger place and that's a better deal, or I need a smaller place, or I'm moving across town for work, or whatever, like the normal reasons people move. So what we called it hangover. The hangover was actually really low. That data certainly wouldn't be true today with the way reviews are. All right, make it less badder. Go ahead.
So I'm using an example here of pet-friendly versus pet-inclusive. Now, my firm is very, very pet-inclusive. We're an award-winning company when it comes to how we manage our pets. And as an amenity, it's a great way to differentiate how you are placing yourself within the market. But it's not just the fact that you've got a pet wash, right? Or that you're using a certain company to help you manage it. It's basically living it. And that's in any amenity that you have on the property, is go back to the basics. Why are you supplying this? And then doing it the best possible way that you can. And one of my favorite examples is down there, Basil. That is our dog, and that is our Chief Happiness Officer for our company. And we live and breathe the dogs on our property. We have an 86-unit property in Frederick, Maryland. I have 47 dogs on it. And we manage it and we love it constantly. And we're also constantly measuring it. And we'll go into a little further into the reviews and how that helps drive your NOI, differentiate yourself, but managing it properly, making sure that you're screening properly, making sure you have the right animals. More importantly, making sure that you have the right pet parents on your property. It's not just you have good credit and have the income, but if you're going to bring a dog, is your dog well trained and managed well? Because one of the things that I've learned over the years, it's not really the dog, it's the owner. And so it's understanding that and managing it is relatively simple, but something, just like everything else we've talked about, something that you need to pay attention to.
How do I top a company that has a C-level, has a dog in their C-level suite, right?
Exactly.
Can't beat it.
It's true. So this is some really interesting data I came across last month that I'm going to be running down a lot more over the next month, so be on the lookout for it. It's really easy to understand that when you tow someone, literally the only person that wins is the tow company. Like, I don't even care if you make money off of towing at your property, like there's a revenue share, like you're still losing because the amount of bad will towing creates cannot be, it doesn't matter if the resident's 100% at fault. It just doesn't matter. Everyone loses except the tow company. So I wanted to look at, okay, if you start taking parking enforcement more seriously, like if you start to educate people like, hey, so this is the rules, and if you are outside of the rules, these are the consequences, and you do a good job managing that, what's the outcome? So I looked at same-store properties year over year, and it's on a decent sample. This is on maybe 10, 15,000 units. There was a 31% drop in tow incidents. And so now I'm running that data through to say like, okay, and what happened to the reviews that are towing related, right? Because I'm super curious about that. But it's really interesting to see that when you just focus on the bad apples, how it has this cascading effect of good. It kind of reminds me of like, there was that kid in the kindergarten class who was like always running amok. And so the teacher decided to make all these rules around that one kid, which by the way, that was me. But it was like you made all these rules around that one kid rather than like just deal with that one kid and not ruin everyone's time. Yeah, I still feel bad about it. But it's one of those things. Like this gives you a way to deal with it in a one-on-one way. That's really different if you have the actionable data. All right.
See the result. Execute best practices. What's going on here on the left? Is that an acceptable? So basically, that is an installation of a switch cover that's crooked, upside down, and the screws aren't aligned. all right? So it's one of my favorite things that I measure when I'm walking units, is how well the unit has been turned. And when I inspect buildings or I'm at comps, it's one of the things that I look at. And of course, Mr. Murphy over here, you see his look at that. So when you're deploying your amenities and you're employing your services, you want to make sure that you're executing with best practices. I do a lot of expert witness work in the standard of care and property management. And so often in this litigation, it's come to litigation because the manager did not execute properly and didn't understand what it was that they were doing, why they were doing it. It seems like a simple thing. The plate's not on straight, it's a little crooked, but it's indicative of a corporate culture that probably is pervasive then throughout how you manage all your amenities in your resident experience. So pay attention, because it will provide you a tremendous amount of value. Who was in the one of the speakers earlier today with the guy from the Ritz-Carlton, right? Great program. I opened up a property 25 years ago where we had the Ritz-Carlton come in and train us on the level of customer service, and so much of that resonated. And you don't have to be a Ritz-Carlton. You can be a manager of workforce housing, but still have an attention to detail, and your residents at every level is going to understand the value of that. They're going to appreciate clean elevator tracks. They're going to appreciate screws that are lined up, because that then becomes part of the corporate culture that will then generate more revenue for you through retention and lots of other ways.
You know, I would add, I think we're going to get into a little bit, we're going to get into rents a little bit later on, but I think, you know, to David's point, as you look at this and executing best practices, where we're at just with the past 10-year run that we've seen with occupancy and rents, you know, not just locally but nationwide, you know, we're starting to get to a point where we're seeing rents kind of detract in some markets, and you know, you're having to work a little bit harder to lease those apartments. And I think these are the markets where, you know, we're kind of going back to the basics from a property management perspective, and the details matter. And so I think this is where it's really presents us with an opportunity as owner operators or as third party operators to really demonstrate professionalism, not to that, you know, not like David's receptacle there.
Yeah, you could argue like the property was in the southern hemisphere and that was correct, but I don't know. It's like the toilet's flushing. Never mind. Go ahead.
Exactly. So this is just a fun slide. Whatever you do, measure. Constantly measure. The only way that you're going to know how well you're doing is you're measuring. And one of my favorite sayings is your best customer is a complaining customer. And I know many of you are probably like, God, I hate it when my residents or my customers complain to me. But you know what? That's the only way that you'll get the feedback that you need to do better, right? Because that's what we're trying to do, or be less bad, as the case may be, because God knows we're never going to be perfect in our industry, and we're going to be hit with so many challenges constantly. So this is one of my properties. I'm very, very proud of my team here. We've constantly win awards. We're one of the top 10 in Satisfax in the small portfolios. And it doesn't happen by accident. It really happens from a very detailed SOP. It happens from constantly measuring. It's coming from constantly walking around and making sure that things are the way they need to be. So it doesn't happen by accident. So it's not just about providing the amenity. It's not just providing the service. It's making sure that you're doing it in the best possible way and you're constantly measuring it.
And you know, something that's interesting with that is, obviously I read a lot of parking reviews, and it was interesting to see that we had one come up a couple weeks ago, because we post the really funny ones internally, just because it kind of gets a kick out of everyone. And this is a fantastic operator. If I said their name, you'd be like, oh yeah, they are definitely great in the business. They do a wonderful job with reputation. They're just a solid, great operator. But that doesn't mean there isn't a pain point for a property that otherwise has fantastic reviews. Like, they may be a 4.6, 4.7, but they have this one issue. And the review that made headlines internally with us a couple weeks ago was, after 6:30 p.m., parking here is like the Hunger Games. And it was like we all laughed, but like, it's literally an issue they inherited, they didn't want, they don't want, but have limited ability to control. So it's one of those things like, okay, what can we do about that? Because if that's the review someone reads, someone's not, maybe doesn't want to live at our otherwise amazing community that's run by a really good staff. So it's always that complaining customer is your best customer. There's a lot of truth to that, although sometimes it's what you don't want to hear.
And remember, it's not just your resident, but it's also your stakeholders. So one of the other things up here was some information from one of the biopest waste companies that we happen to use on the on-site staff and dealing with dog poop. And this was a great stat where job satisfaction goes up 65% because you've put into place a dog poop program. And again, it's usually just the 1 or 2 residents that are leaving those gifts around the property, but it kind of ruins it for everybody else. It ruins it for the on-site staff to have to deal with it. So put into place, and we call it an amenity. It is a service because it comes with not just the testing, but it's also a registration. And for those of you who own dogs or any animals, DNA registration, things like that. God forbid they get lost. But this is just, we sell it as an amenity, and you know what? It solves a lot of problems. Again, keeping it simple.
So this was a really interesting case study I saw from Mark Taylor Residential. Most of you probably know, really very famous Arizona company, does a great job. They had one issue that was driving them nuts at this property that they ultimately needed to sell. It was a third-party contract. And in solving this issue, they had like a 44% increase in their resident score, and this property was trailing their company average, and they had a 91% decrease in the negative reviews surrounding this issue. So it was really interesting to me that like they just picked an issue, they focused on it, and it impacted everything around their property. And again, like if you know the folks at Mark Taylor, and they're actually here this week, they're fantastic operators. Like they're really good guys and gals. So, anyways, focusing on one issue really helps. Okay, so kind of bringing it back. There's so many things to focus on. Everyone's so busy right now, and
We've always been so busy.
well, but I think people are busier now. I know from talking to my, I'm fortunate where a lot of my customers are my friends, and and just talking to them personally, like what are they struggling with? Everyone seems to have more on their plate than they have in the past. And if you say, you try and solve the whole problem, I don't know, maybe that's too much. But can you pick 3 things? Can you pick one thing and solve that? And then when you're done, maybe solve one more? I think sometimes making things a little less painful to grab is an interesting way to start. I don't know if you want to go.
Yeah, and again, this is kind of the overall theme that we're trying to provide is that provide your amenities, choose your market, choose what amenities are going to resonate, but then manage those amenities and manage that user experience. Leverage the data by doing all the surveys, understanding what it is. Listen, you may find that an amenity you had no longer resonates. I had a property that had a racquetball court. Well, that was so 90s, right? So now it turned into something completely different. I think it's a property we don't manage anymore, but we just changed the usage. I had a property that had a tennis court. This was workforce housing. There was no tennis courts. So nobody was playing tennis, but what we did was we took down the nets and we made it a street hockey court that the kids love type of thing. So think about what it is by monitoring the usage, monitoring what your residents want, asking those questions, and then as Todd said, apply with precision. Take just a few of those things and make an impact. Your residents will thank you for it. It will result in better reputations. It will result in retention and better rents.
Well, actually, I got kind of a question. And I think, I don't know, how much more do we have to go in the
A
program for?
couple more slides.
More time?
We're
Okay.
good.
So I think one question that I have is certainly with what we're seeing in the market today, as far as occupancy and rent growth, I'm kind of curious to see what's working for you in different markets with respect to rental rates and then sort of these add-ons that we might have seen historically for different property level services and amenities. And are you seeing any kind of a shift to maybe bundling those in just to rents, or are you still seeing those added on? I'd be kind of curious to see what some of you have to say there.
Anybody?
Anybody? No?
I can tell you, we have some extras that we've added, and unfortunately, state of California is very, very strict with what you can bundle and you really can't. And so, on the sell side, we can say and do, but we have to itemize everything. So, honestly, that has been a hurdle that we're hoping to overcome. But yeah, we're at California state regulation, unfortunately.
Yeah, that is one of the hard parts.
And
Yeah.
Maryland has many of the same.
Yeah.
If I can add that, also in California, what we're seeing now is that there's inconsistently inflating rent and fees.
Yes,
So you're damned if you, damned if you don't.
100%, yeah.
So anyone not in the People's Republic of California that isn't having quite as many of these issues? Okay.
We owner manage in California, we have the same issue with rent control and adding things on, it's just a challenge. But in Arizona, Mark Taylor manages our buildings, and there's rolling out a product called Mark Taylor Plus, where it's including package delivery, Wi-Fi, I can't remember them all, I should, but basically the bundle itself costs as much as the Wi-Fi would to the tenant.
Oh, interesting.
So as an owner, it's really helping our bottom line.
So it's money they're gonna spend anyway.
Correct.
And then they get everything else.
It's been a little bit tricky at first. I know they made the news at the beginning because it's forcing you to use Cox versus other
Right.
choices. But they have worked around that. It seems to.
But you couldn't work around that in California, for instance, right? With the internet thing?
Well, in California, you can't raise, you've got rent control and they bundle that into rent. So it doesn't matter what you do, you've got.
Got it.
Right, living wage property.
So are those in markets that are otherwise, I mean, is that just under the AB 1482? So they're not
That's correct.
specialized? Okay, got it.
Anyone else, like outside of California, have other stories or in California that wants to cry or anything? No? Look, as one of the like 7 people born and raised in Los Angeles that still lives there, like, look at the weather, okay? Like, yeah. Y'all didn't mind coming here this week, right? So, all right, you want to?
How many people recognize what this is? So this is a platform that we use. I'm not allowed to use any names in these presentations, but this is a platform that we use. They happen to be here that provides resident referrals through our website. And what the model is basically we have our prospects talk to our current residents. So there's 2 things that need to happen with that. One is you have to be supremely confident that you're providing great service. Because you want your prospects to be talking to your current residents, because nobody can provide you a better advertisement than somebody who actually lives there. But this is the sentiment analysis. And what happens with this platform that I absolutely love is it's not so much that I can close a couple leases because my residents gave a good review or had a good conversation, is that it captures their conversations. And it tells me exactly what it is that they're talking about. Is it dogs? Is it our events? Is it maintenance? Is it noise? Is it traffic? Whatever it might be. And so in the red, it gives you what the resident is talking about, what's important to them. And then in the blue or the teal is what our prospects are talking about. And so we talked about several times, you can't manage what you can't measure. This is, I find, one of the fantastic ways to develop that sentiment, not only what your current residents want, that is a little bit away from just the reviews that a Satisfax or a Reputation.com or your OR score, any of those kind of things. This is your actual residents talking to an actual prospect. And so we love this. And if you're not using something like this, I highly suggest it because it's going to let you understand where the issues are, where that complaining customer is, how to solve that issue, or how to delight your customer. Going back to those who listened to the Ritz-Carlton guide today, is how do you do aspirational marketing to them? How do you respond to them before they even know what they want? Well, you know what? You've got a little bit of an insight here because your current resident isn't necessarily telling you, and your prospect's not necessarily telling you. Because as good as your leasing consultant is in overcoming objections and asking the right questions, they're still not going to be truthful with you, right? That's just sales. It's always the challenge in sales. They might be holding back. So this is why we use this as an example here. Sentiments is fantastic.
So that's a recommendation, right, I guess?
That would be a recommendation.
Okay.
Okay, so, this is kind of like putting it all down, right? And I think we kind of got a little bit of ahead of ourselves here. But again, it doesn't have to be fancy. I mean, I was thinking of opening up a side business selling poop bags and calling it like AI poop bags, because I figure if I put AI in the name, everyone will buy them. But like, it doesn't, like, it can have like actually a simple outcome or a simple task and still be something highly relevant. Anything else you guys want to add before we
I think
get?
WeWork did that.
What's that?
Yeah.
They-
They're renting space, but they were a tech company.
Ah, there we go.
And of course, now they're owned by a tech company.
So,
Yeah, that's
questions? Feedback, yes.
Yeah, so going back to just kind of looking at our amenities and kind of the most common problems, just like in my experience, what I've seen is after a couple of warnings to, those like bad Apple residents, is they're usually the ones to quickly post that bad review of, and they'll just kind of misrepresent the situation and things like that. So how can you keep that medium or that balance of managing the property, making sure residents have everything that they need, but also kind of protecting our brand and just our company overall?
Well, look, there's a few people in the room here, including you guys, that are really skilled at this, much more skilled than me. I'm more of a nerd. But like addressing that issue in a factual way, in a polite, factual way.
Yeah, because we do this all the time, is lean into your bad reviews. I think everybody knows, if you've been trained in sales and customer service, that usually the best experiences are recovery experiences, right? And so what better opportunity for you to show off than respond to somebody's negative review? And again, as Todd said, you want to be polite, you want to be politically correct, if you will, but when you respond, most customers and prospective customers will see right through what it is that person was saying, whatever their problem was. And that's what we have found. So we don't ignore it, we lean right into it, and we own it. And that's usually what we have found has made all the difference in the world from that perspective.
We get beat up all the time when someone gets towed. Like, it's always our fault. I'm like, really? Like, it clearly said you're not supposed to park there and you park there. Yeah, like, sorry, yeah. I forced you to do that. And so you just have to deal with those bumps and bruises. But, if you respond like, no, so this is what happened, at this time you did this, at this time you did this, we actually gave you these 2 warnings, then you still chose not to do it, we feel bad that you feel bad, but again, there's a lot of people here are like gifted at this. I'm not, I'm too sarcastic. Other
What else?
questions?
Come on, you can't all be so quiet. A bunch of marketing people.
Right?
Come on. What kind of, yes, sir.
I guess, a question for everyone in here. So one thing that I found an issue with, not so much on student, but with the EV charging stations, is that they do take a while to charge a car. So like, you typically do need several hours. So has anyone explored into superchargers or?
Yeah, so we only installed Type 2, and then we're looking at doing, is it Type 4? I think it goes.
Was that the 200 amp one?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that, like any kind of technology, we all used to install those USB things in our apartments. Well, those don't work anymore because it's all USB-C now. And so I think as technology changes, you just need to upgrade, because you should be able to charge a car. And by the way, it also depends on the car, but you should be able to charge a car in a couple hours at this point. And particularly when everybody starts going to the Tesla standard, that'll make a difference
That'll make
as
it
well.
easier.
Yeah, great question.
Well, any other questions, comments? Thank you all for joining. We appreciate you spending some of your day with us.
Thank you very much.